Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala sayyidina rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala. SubhanAllah, these spaces, this particular space, does not feel like, unless if you come and recite Quran here, it won't feel as part of the masjid. So inshallah, once we get accustomed to it, it will be absolutely normal. Who was telling me yesterday? Someone. And I feel like this is not the masjid. It feels like a separate place to the masjid. Just we have treated it as such, like we've been treating it as a storage. So it's hard to think of it as a prayer room or something. Inshallah, we shall make a start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. It's verse number 48. ولقد آتينا موسى وهارون الفرقان وضياء وذكرا للمتقين الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب وهم من الساعة مشفقون وهذا ذكر مبارك أنزلناه أفأنتم له منكرون ولقد آتينا إبراهيم رشده من قبل وكنا به عالمين إذ قال لأبيه وقومه ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين قال لقد كنتم أنتم وآباؤكم في ضلال مبين قالوا أجئتنا بالحق أم أنت من اللاعبين قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن وأنا على ذلك من الشاهدين وتالله لأكيدن أصنامكم بعد أن تولوا مدبرين فجعلهم جذاذا إلا كبيرا لهم لعلهم إليه يرجعون قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا إنه لمن الظالمين قالوا سمعنا فتى يذكرهم يقال له إبراهيم قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون قالوا أأنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا فاسألوهم إن كانوا ينطقون فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم وأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأخسرين ونجيناه ولوطا إلى الأرض التي باركنا فيها للعالمين ووهبنا له إسحاق ويعقوب نافلة وكلا جعلنا صالحين وجعلناهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا وأوحينا إليهم فعل الخيرات وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة الزكاة وكانوا لنا عابدين. صدق الله العظيم. My apologies, it's a bit of a long passage, but quite connected. Just to connect this to the previous discussion, this passage is taking us, is providing some sort of solace to the Prophet ﷺ. So you may think of it this way: the previous passages have been somehow theoretical in the sense that they tell the Prophet ﷺ, this is how these people have been thinking. This is the primary way, the key claims they make, the concepts basically. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ examples. These are examples of prophets that have been grappling with these issues, real life examples, and instead of having concepts to work with. We'll see the Quran beginning with Musa alayhi salam and Harun. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ فُرْقَانًا وَضِيَاءً وَذِكْرًا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Moses and Aaron, they both have been given Al-Furqan, and Al-Furqan is one of the names of, can be taken as one of the names of Torah, the names of the Quran as well. And it's, in Arabic there is this sort of, when you come to name something, you name it also with its function. The function of the Quran is to distinguish what is right from what is wrong. So one of the names of the Quran, one of the names of the Torah is that they play this role, the role of distinction, differentiation, if you wish. وَضِيَاءً, it enlightens people. وَذِكْرًا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, a source of remembrance for the people who take heed. Who are those people? الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ. It's the people that have this sense of awe of the Lord. Bil-Ghayb basically could mean when they don't see Him. Nobody had seen Allah before. But it could also mean they have the sense of mindfulness about Allah, even when it is in private, when nobody is observing them. So it's they call it in the spiritual tradition fil khala wa fil mala. Like when you are with people and when you are without people, you have this sense of observation and of Allah. وَهُمْ مِنَ السَّاعَةِ مُشْفِقُونَ, and they are always, have this sense again of awe of the day of judgment, of that hour. وَهَذَا ذِكْرٌ مُبَارَكٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ. And now this book you have, it's a blessed book, we've revealed it to you. أَفَأَنْتُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Let's see what you will do with it. Would you reject it? وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Long ago, we've also endowed Ibrahim alayhi salam with that sense of sound judgment very early on in his life. وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And we knew who he was. Much can be said here. Perhaps we'll keep this for the discussion. إذ قال لأبيه وقومه ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون. When he said to his father and to his people, what are these statues or these idols that you worship and you devote yourselves to? قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين. They said, we just found our fathers and forefathers equally devoted to them. قال لقد كنتم أنتم وآباؤكم في ضلال مبين. He said immediately, you want them have been absolutely mistaken. قالوا أجئتنا بالحق أم أنت من اللاعبين. They said, are you being serious? Or are you just joking? قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن. He said, indeed, your Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth. He is the one who created them. وأنا على ذلك من الشاهدين, and I have an evidence for this. وتالله لأكيدن أصنامكم بعد أن تولوا مدبرين. By Allah, I quietly have a plan against these idols once you go away to your celebration. فجعلهم جدادا إلا كبيرا لهم. As they were celebrating one of the festivals, Ibrahim came secretly to these idols and he smashed them all, excepting the biggest one of them. لعلهم إليه يرجعون, so that they may come back to this big idol for answers. They did. قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا إنه لمن الظالمين. So they said, who has done this to our lords? He must be one of those troublemakers. قالوا سمعنا فتى يذكرهم يقال له إبراهيم. They said, we've heard of a young boy that was mentioned a couple of days ago. His name is Ibrahim. قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون. They said, let's get him in front of the people in public so they may see what happens to him. قالوا أنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم. Now the confrontation begins. Are you the one who's done this to our lords, to our gods? He said, well, بل فعله كبيرهم هذا. It's actually the one that has done this is the biggest idol. You can't see the axe on his neck. Can't you see that? Ask them if they can speak. فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون. So they came back to the senses and they said, you are the one that has done it. They are now addressing that big idol. ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم. And now after they temporarily had this sense of awakeness, they went back again to the old ways. لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون. He said, the established tradition is that they don't speak. We know that for a fact. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he literally exploded intellectually. He said, أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم. How on earth do you worship something besides Allah that doesn't harm you, that can't help you, nothing? أُفِّلْ لَكُمْ وَلِمَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Shame on you and shame to the idols that you worship besides Allah. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Can't you reason, can't you think for yourselves? قَالُوا حَرِّقُوهُ وَانْصُرُوا آلِهَتَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ فَاعِلِينَ. They said, burn him alive and stand by your idols, stand by your lords if you truly want to do something about it. قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كُونِي بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. But we intervened and we said to the fire, be cool and a source of safety for Ibrahim. وَأَرَادُوا بِهِ كَيْدًا فَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ. And they designed all this against him, but we made them the losing ones. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And we actually saved him and Lut, that is his cousin. His nephew, his nephew. إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So we saved him and Lut to the place, to the Holy Land, where we blessed for all the people. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ نَافِلَةً. And we've given him Isaac as a son and Jacob as a grandson. وَكُلًّا جَعَلْنَا صَالِحِينَ. And we made them both righteous people. وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. And we made them leaders in goodness. يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. Guided by our own command. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. And we inspired them to do what is good collectively. وَإِقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءَ الزَّكَاةِ. To establish the prayer and to give in charity. وَكَانُوا لَنَا عَابِدِينَ. And instead they were dedicated to us, not to anyone else. Very packed passage. 1 minute of silent reflection and then inshallah. Oh yeah, how are you? Are you here against your will or voluntarily. No, I said
No.
Okay. Once in 1,000 years. Arnie, shall I begin with you?
Can I say no?
Really?
Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't finished.
No problem.
Oh.
My,
قال فأتوا بها على الناس. The next two verse actually.
okay.
فأتوا على الناس من بعد مشهدهم قالوا أنت فعلت هذا
ونجيناه ولوطا إلى الأرض التي باركنا فيها للعالمين.
فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم
محمد.
ولقد أتينا إبراهيم رشده.
زين.
ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم كذلك هؤلاء.
Ryan, did you get a chance to have a look at the passage? No pressure. Okay, no problem. No problem. Jamal? Yeah.
وأنا على ذلك من الشهيد.
On my side. Maybe.
Can I add?
Yeah.
قالوا سمينا the 60 and 61.
Okay.
Them two.
Okay, perfect. Mike, what did you pick?
I just was wondering about how Sayyidina Ibrahim dealt with the issue in terms of قالوا فأتوا به أحد أعين الناس. And then they asked him firstly, did you do this or not? In terms of not punishing him straight away, but they just like bring him like in front of everybody and then asked him. I don't know, was this justice system that they were establishing there, or just like to make people like be witness.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. I mean, we defended Fir'aun before. It's not too difficult for us to defend that. So, I think what's happening here is, Wallahu alam, the point is not having a just system, but mainly it's all لعلهم يشهدون. So it's a very intentional thing. So they want the people to get to see what is going to happen to this person that is, slandering the idols. So they make it very clear from very early on that this is our intention. It's not really to investigate who said what. But that's a good observation, though. Thank you.
The same conversation, Surat al-Baqarah, في النمرود when they said فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق والمغرب فهو الذي كفر. I mean, there were like some sort of conversation there, not some kind of dictatorship.
Okay. So do you mean there is a scope or a space for this sort of debate.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll say more about this. Thank you for this. That's a really good one. That's a really good one. Much of today's passage has to do with this, the culture of the day, and I think it's one of the missing points that we don't discuss often. Thank you, Gibran.
I feel like many of us can guess where I'm going with this, but I feel like the Quran very explicitly stating that this is the land we blessed for all people, multiple times in various places, the blessed land. Yet the argument among several communities until this day, among Muslim communities until this day, persisting that, but no, this was the land that was given to the Bani Israel as a promise. Continuing on, I feel like the Quran fundamentally disproves that, but there is this intentionally skewed understanding that's being promoted, particularly in the Gulf.
Can you elaborate more on this?
I mean, since the Abraham Accords, it's almost it's accepted universally, at least in the UAE, that this is the land of the Bani Israel.
That is Jerusalem.
That is all of occupied Palestine.
This is the public discourse in Emirates.
This is both the public and the scholarly discourse among the elite.
Okay.
Yet.
Okay.
Have you had the Quran?
Sure.
Many places being almost twisted, and even this verse being almost twisted to say, but look, it was to Ibrahim, and then look, this is how the chronology goes. So the statements of the Zionist entity stand true in some ways. I think that's I would believe extremely to the contrary, but I'd love to hear your
thoughts. I mean, the Quran is a really, thank you for sharing this, Japan. The Quran is a really challenging book in the sense that it challenges Muslims to be better Muslims, in the sense that it's asking them to avoid the sense of tribalism. It critiques the Jews and the Christians for claiming that we are the chosen ones. And it does the same thing with Muslims. By the end of the day, it's not according to your wishful thinking. Neither the Jews, nor the Muslims, nor the Christians. What comes down it comes down by the end of the day to who really becomes a source of goodness on earth. And the Quran is challenging primarily because of this. It doesn't take people's claims for granted. The test of action becomes really the one to go with. And like you said, the Holy Land, according to in the Quranic worldview, is a space open to everyone. It's never limited to a specific tribe or a specific group of people. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention that all this is happening in the Babylonian kingdom. So that's why the Quran says, after this, Ibrahim and Lut were saved and moved to the Holy Land. The Holy Land is not just Jerusalem. It actually, according to today's geography, it covers Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Sinai. In the Quranic, in today's geographical system, all this has been divided, but these various places have some sort of holiness to them, and again, the Quran is saying this is universal. It's never limited to a specific people also. Yeah. And this is the Quranic way of things anyway. It's against any sort of tribalism, be it in theology, be it in law, be it in by the end of the day, because we believe we go back to one God and to our father Adam alayhi salam. Yeah. But thank you again for another wonderful observation. Haf.
The reason I chose the sentence is because it's just very enigmatic in that فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم. it's like they came back to themselves. Like, who's they in the beginning of the sentence? It's linked to me to the other verse that we normally recite. نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. I'm just trying to tap into what the concept is of forgetting oneself in that, and that they came back into themselves. Where were they before? That's why it struck me.
Interesting. فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون.
We could take it as they came back to like discussions within themselves, as in groups. In that they were talking to Ibrahim and then they looked back between themselves and had a discussion. But I think with the mentioning of dhikr and or dhikra and so on and so forth, and I think the surah in the very beginning talks about فكرة اللهو أو being قلوبهم لاهية أو لاهية قلوبهم. And the verse that I mentioned, I was just wondering what I feel like it's a deeper sense of losing oneself.
ليش كمان يا عبد الله؟ The verse is definitely striking, and I've been thinking about it myself. What is it? As in, I first of all, I take it, of course, it comes across as in a positive note. Yeah. And it feels like it's a moment of wakefulness. And now we're being honest, and we are, at least, momentarily being honest with ourselves that something is happening here. But then when they start thinking about it in terms of what would this mean for us? Measuring this against the tradition. ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم. ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم. One can actually read it in a different way. You could say, these people, for a moment, they were on the verge of going in the right direction, but then they got inverted. When فلان انتكس على رأسه, as in his situation has been completely reversed, as if they were really going on the right side. And when they started to think, what is the price of this? It's leaving behind our tradition. So instead of going in the right direction, straight path, they actually reversed. ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم. So when someone نكس على رأسه, it's like this. You literally fall behind. Exactly.
That's how I understood إنكم أنتم الظالمون. In that they weren't. To me, I didn't see it firstly as they could be speaking to the statues, but speaking to themselves, as in we've made a mistake. رجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون. We got it wrong. Ibrahim is right. ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم.
Very possibly. So of course they are not having a conversation with the idols, they are having a conversation with themselves. Who is ظالمون to whom then? Could be ظالمون to Ibrahim. You've wronged Ibrahim. Possibly. And that's the beauty of the Quranic language. It's ocean of meaning. But thank you for bringing this up. Thank you.
So وَلَقَدْ أَتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ. I like this because the key word here is رُشْدَهُ, sound judgment. And it seems to me everything that happens after this is because of this sound judgment. And it seems to me he wasn't reactive to everything that happened. So when he went and destroyed the idols, he didn't just react to the reaction, right? He had this, it seems to me he had this plan in mind, and he took it one step at a time. First of all, he told them what's going to happen, and then he went and did it. And then he challenged, so this was the challenge to them. And then he responded. So it seems to me it was a plan from the very beginning, just because he was, because of his, as always his very.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's. I said this before. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when you read about him, it's called the Abrahamic religions or the Abrahamic tradition for a good reason, because they all respect Ibrahim alayhi salam. but how Ibrahim is presented in the Torah, how Ibrahim is presented in the Gospels. It's more of someone who has much trust in Allah. Literally, which is something that happened. The Quran presents it as something that the latest episode of Ibrahim's life. It's the place where you can really locate this trust. Like when trust comes at its peak, it's literally the last stage in the Quran. What the Quran does is taking him throughout the journey from Ibrahim as a young boy, maturing until he reaches this final moment of trust in Allah, on the verge of slaughtering his own kid. So the Quran does introduce Ibrahim alayhi salam as a philosopher, does introduce him as an intellectual who is forming the public discourse here. And you know what fascinates me about this verse is literally the word min qabl, very early on. And people, when you come to discuss in Islamic theology, there's one of the most controversial questions is the question of prophethood. هل هي بالكسب أم بالاكتساب? How does one become a prophet? Is it something that Allah provides you with? Allah gifts you this thing? Or is it something that you really earn with your work, with your worship, with your... The mainstream position in Islamic theology is prophethood is something that you can't really earn. It is something that Allah gifts. It is a divine gift. Allah chooses, Allah chooses whomever He wills for this position. Very tiny minority argue that it is actually one can really earn this title, can become a prophet, but this is not, again, the established position. One of this way of thinking in Islamic theology, I'm a bit critical of it. Things are either this or that. This either or framework is not very helpful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not, one of the things about the Quran is that it always disturbs dichotomies. And the very verse that I just cited, Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata. Allah does not choose people randomly. Because when you say Allah gifts this prophethood, it makes you feel that anyone, Allah does these things arbitrarily, and He just elevates people out of nowhere. Does it work this way? No, it is definitely a divine gift. One can argue, but at the very same time, Allah prepares these people. Imagine if someone who's been, alcoholic or this or that, and then he comes and says, I've been given prophethood. How would people accept that? So, the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Mohammed, we've seen his long journey before he became a prophet. It's as if Allah has prepared him throughout these years. So when you phrase things in this way, it's either this or that. It doesn't really help you see the bigger picture. So be aware, really, and be alert to any sort of dichotomous thinking, either or patterns. Very dangerous, really. Alien to the Quran, but very common in the Western culture, by the way. Either you're liberal or conservative. Either you are, these dichotomies are left or right. Everywhere. When one can really, and this is what the Hegel, the philosopher, comes up with a system that challenges this, but again it gets reversed. He says basically that by the end of the day, after these two dichotomies comes something in the middle that unites these two different polarities. Quranically speaking, no, the Quran doesn't know these things. Actually, the Quran challenges this at the deepest level. In Surat Yusuf, it says, وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Says that no one of them believes, except that they would, in the very same time, be polytheists. What is this? We always thought that shirk is opposite to, or polytheism is opposite to faith. But Allah says it does coexist if you're not really alert to it. So these dichotomies are not really Quranic. So one has to be very cautious of them in general. حتى في الحياة, in life, be wary of people. Don't we call it black and white thinking? Black and white thinking is literally this way of thinking. Even intellectually, it's this, either this or that. Either you are a Muslim or you are a Western. Really? Is it? I can be both. Yeah. Zayan.
I don't really know like how to explain it, but it's like it says like arguing you already know that these idols cannot talk. So like I'm interested in like what goes in their mindset when they say like these idols are our gods, because they know like it's not all powerful, like these idols cannot do anything for them. So like how they try to justify that these are our gods, and like when Ibrahim alayhi salam here comes up with a proof saying ask the biggest idol, and they say like you know he can't talk, so like on what grounds are they justified like they are worthy of worship?
Sure.
So kind of.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good observation, Zayan, which ties to the question of justification. Part of the modern scientific method is the question of justification. What could lead someone to believe in idols? They make it themselves. And when you look at things only from this perspective, without looking at the context, the human mind is really unique in how it works. Surat Nuh tells us that the 5 major idols that they had in Nuh's time, Yaghuth, wa Ya'uq, wa Nasra, Wadda, these are names of idols that they had back then. And prior to that, these were good people, righteous people. Because they loved them so much, they turned they made images of them, they made statues of them, or idols. The next generation doesn't know why these people were celebrated. So they thought they themselves are, sources of power, sources of bliss, blah, blah, blah. Next generation does not even ask why these things were, venerated or so. So what happened? This is literally the power of collective thinking, the power of tradition. We are born within that way of thinking. You don't really ask, you just follow. So this is literally how these things happen. You see something, and imagine being born, and you see all these idols everywhere. People respect them, maybe because they were righteous people, but you don't really know the story behind them. What comes to your mind is that people respect these things. They think these are sources of power, sources of bliss, or whatever. You just follow. Then the cycle goes until someone comes up and says, "What is this?" That's literally what Ibrahim is doing here. So Ibrahim, in this case, is literally going against popularity. And just think of it today. How difficult it is to go against a popular position. You yourself become easily infamous, mainly because you're going against the popular. That's the power of popularity. When people have a popular opinion that they deeply held. So it just takes generations to develop these ways. But you're right. It always should strike us like how people end up being that stupid. Yeah. Come on.
قال لقد كنتم أنتم آباؤكم في ضلال مبين. He didn't say لقد كنتم. He also included their the previous generations. And he was alayhi salam very clear and very direct to them.
Interesting.
And that reminds me also of the Sahaba when they went to Najashi and described their history and how the Arabs were living before Islam, how they treated women, and all. You can summarize everything in Fi Dalalin Mubin. So what they inherited from their fathers, maybe in that time their fathers and the sons and multiple generations were there living. So he tried to speak to the three or two generations who were listening to him.
Interesting. I really like the first thought you had. You know, Ibrahim being direct. Antum wa aba'ukum, and this is a young boy. How could you do that? Being that direct, the moral courage that Ibrahim alayhi salam is having, the moral clarity as well. You know, you could just speak in the generics. You could say, you know, this way of thinking is not really the best way of thinking. Is you are the ones. This whole tradition. That's fascinating. Yeah. But thank you for the opinion. Say there.
The reason I chose وأنا على ذلك من الشاهدين is because I think I was struck at the fact that he uses the word shahideen, and of course Ibrahim, as you said, is introduced as a critical thinker, but I think what adds to that ingenious is the fact that he's not only critical, he probably has some interesting argument for the existence of God that is somewhat maybe wasn't prevalent back then. Maybe not now. Maybe we don't know about it. But it's something to be called Burhan al-Shahideen, because why would he say وَأَنَا عَلَى ذَلِكُمْ مِنَ الشَّاهِدِينَ? Anyone could. I mean, of course, clearly, no one can say أنا على خلق السماوات والأرض شاهد in that way. So I'm trying to tap into that genius and question, and probably hopefully in the future explore the kind of argument that Ibrahim alayhi salam had for the existence of God, for him to say, I am a witness to that.
Okay, interesting. When I read this verse, what comes to my mind immediately is Ibrahim's story in Surat Al-An'am. Him seeing the stars and قال هذا ربي فلما رأى الشمس بازغة قال هذا ربي. When he sees the moon, he says, this is probably my Lord. Sees the sun, probably my Lord. To me, he is referring to his personal journey, as if he is, you know, I've seen it with my own eyes, I've experienced this, I have my evidence. And you could as well, and that's my understanding of it. He is referring to his own journey. So I've seen it with my own eyes. I've witnessed this. I have an evidence, basically. But you could also read it as more of a him prophesizing the future, as in I will show you the evidence in what I do. وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامًا, I will show you that these are useless idols. How can we develop this into what we can call Burhan al-Shahideen? That's a really interesting one. Tell me if you ever can come up with something. We're next to Burhan al-Siddiqeen, inshallah.
Could be that when Sayyidina Ibrahim said في سورة البقرة رب أرني كيف تحيي الموتى.
Yeah, definitely could be. I mean, his entire journey. The thing about the Quran, it doesn't give us any sort of chronology. It doesn't tell us this has happened at this point. You know, you see hints here and there. We know he was younger than this when he had this, when he had seen the sun and the moon, blah blah blah. Now he's not that old, but he's young boy. But definitely Al-An'am one is prior to this one.
And where do you place the one in Surat Al-Baqarah?
No, that's an advanced one.
Oh, after.
The one رب أرني كيف تحيي الموتى. Oh. He, Ibrahim, is asking asking Allah, how do you give life back to the dead? When is this happening in Ibrahim's life? Because it happens right after, in the Quranic order, it comes right after his encounter with the Nimrod. the killing, that encounter. Okay. When scholars come to discuss who was involved here in the one in Surat Anbyaa, burning him, they say An-Namrud also was the king of the day, and he is actually the one who ordered him to be tried, blah blah blah. Could this have happened before that? I mean, could Ibrahim asking Allah, how can you give life back to the dead? Or was it before this or after? I don't think there is any Quranic evidence, no from the Sunnah.
Can it be maybe in the reply in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where he says أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ, could that mean that it's potentially after the thing with Surat Al-An'am, in that after you've believed, are you still asking for more proof?
Definitely, possibly. Could definitely be the case. You could actually frame it this way. This is happening to Ibrahim, like step by step. He is now proven that Allah exists, that He is one, blah blah blah. Now he's moving to how He gives life back to the dead. Could definitely be the case. Wallahu a'lam. But that's an interesting one. Abdullah didn't manage to. Okay, no problem. ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون. You see, Ibn Taymiyyah has an interesting statement. He says, Al-Qur'anu masailu wa dalail. He says the Quran is not just a book of content. It gives you the content to believe in this, believe in that. But he says it's also a book of methods. It gives you evidence, the ways of thinking, if you wish. So not just what to think, but how you think. Right? And that's really what fascinates me about Ibrahim alayhi salam, is literally the way, his methodology, if you wish. Ibrahim says, there is a famous hadith in Bukhari and in Muslim as well, where we are told that on the day of judgment, people would try and find someone to intercede before them to Allah. And they would go to prophets like one by one, to Noah, to Jesus, to Musa, and they would come to Ibrahim. And when they come to Ibrahim, every prophet would say, it's not really my field because I've made a mistake. And Ibrahim is reported to have said, I've made 3 mistakes. And because I've lied 3 times. How many times have we lied? So he said, I lied 3 times. One of those times is when I said, بَلْ فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُمْ هَذَا. He says, it's actually the one that destroyed these idols is the biggest idol. Right? The hadith, even though it's mentioned in Bukhari, I find it hard to digest and process when mainly because I don't see Ibrahim here as a liar, and only if you take Ibrahim out of context, and only if you take a literal understanding of the Quran, that you would frame him as a liar. Why am I saying this? Ibrahim alayhi salam lived a long time ago, before Judaism, before we can't pinpoint exactly when he lived, but long, 1,000 years. When you come, part of our introducing of Ibrahim alayhi salam as a philosopher or as a critical thinker, if you wish, is how we came to know philosophical methods in Greek. We know that the masters of philosophy were Greek. And he had one of the key names is Socrates. Surat. Taha Abdul Rahman is a contemporary Moroccan philosopher. His latest book is actually, he says, Greek philosophy goes back to prophets. All these wisdom, all these intellectual thinking that when you get fascinated when you read Plato, when you read Socrates. All these people, when you, wow, how did, because Socrates, he was martyred. Why was he martyred? Because he believed in one God, which went against the popular opinion of his day, right? After that, the Christianity came, and they themselves were astonished. How could someone who did not receive revelation arrive at a belief in one God? And in this very particular moment, the dichotomy of reason versus revelation comes in. Early Christians were astonished. How could you arrive at one God, at this monotheistic belief, when you have no revelation? But they had a sense of appreciation at the same time. They had diverse views, but there was a man called Tertullian who lived in the 3rd century of the Christian tradition, Father Tertullian. He's known for this statement. He says, "What has Athens to do with Jerusalem?" By way of saying, Christianity was born in Jerusalem, revelation based. Athens is the birth of philosophy. These guys have nothing to do with us. And even if they are believers in one God, it's useless, as long as they don't have revelation. This was one position. It came to be dominant at some point in Christian history, but it was not. In early Christianity, this was debated hugely. And comes in this context, another school in the Christian tradition that believed, no, we can actually accept these people because they believed in one God. Yes, we might have different methods of arriving at the same God, but let's take this. You see, all this goes back again to this dichotomy. That's why I'm saying be wary of these dichotomies. Either reason or revelation. Makes you think that revelation is just irrational or something, or superstitious. In the Quran, this is useless. This is a useless argument. Taha Abdul Rahman, Professor Taha Abdul Rahman, basically says, in reality, Greek philosophy was handled and handed down by through prophets. Just the linkage is not there. We don't have access to the chain of narration. But if you trace these, let's give an example. This man, Socrates, he doesn't have much to say, but methods. Like if you try and locate what does he say about things, he doesn't say anything. It's all about methods. He is known for two primary methods. One, in Arabic they call them at-tahakkum, and the second is called at-tawlid. The first one is called Socratic irony, and the second is called, you could call it actually let's call it literally the art of midwifery. What happens here? With at-tahakkum, as you can tell from the word, Socrates, he lived at a time when people were doubting everything. What happens when someone tells you, wow, this is a sophisticated argument? You're so excited. I had a sophisticated argument. In fact, this is an insult. Because it means it's just a lie that looks good. You've articulated it well, but it is sophistry. It is presented well, but it has a sense of sophistry to it. Sophistry, we call it in Arabic safsata. Like you're trying to make something presentable and make it look logical, but in reality it is not. This sophistry, or safsata as we call it in Arabic today, goes back to a group of people that were called sophists, that lived in Socrates' time. These people, this was their job, literally, to make people doubt their beliefs. And Socrates, he made it his job as well to counter the arguments. How do I make this happen? He introduced this theory, two-step theory. First step is the Socratic irony. What does he do? So he begins by pretending to be ignorant. That's number one. And then he asks, let's assume we're having a conversation about justice. So he pretends to be ignorant of what justice is. He asks you to talk. When he asks, he doesn't ask difficult questions. He asks very seemingly simple questions. That's the second step. And then he takes you to recognize your own contradictions, that you'll get to laugh at yourself. This is what they call it, the Socratic irony. So you yourself would make a fool of yourself if you wish. Right? Who's doing that here? It's Ibrahim. Ibrahim alayhi salam is practicing this. But I'll clarify that in a bit. So Socrates is doing that. First thing, pretending to be ignorant. Second, posing a seemingly simple question. ما هذه التماثيل? I mean, you know what they are. You know these are idols. Right? And then he ends up with demonstrating their own contradictions. He doesn't do that himself. He lets them arrive at their own conclusion. That takes us to the second step after the Socratic irony. That is at-tawlid, midwifery. And the reason, I mean, Socrates had two important ladies in his life. His mom and his wife. His wife gave him a hard time, in the sense that he always, he complains about, he doesn't complain, actually says, she taught me how to be patient. But his mom used to be a midwife. Socrates' mom was a midwife. And then he says, what my mom is doing to women when they come to give birth, I do to people in terms of how they think. He says, my mom does not give birth herself. As in, when someone is pregnant, she doesn't give birth. But she helps them in the delivery. That's why he calls it midwifery. He calls his own way of thinking midwifery, in the sense, I am helping. I mean, that's Plato naming him, basically. I am helping you arrive at the conclusion yourself, as if you are giving birth to an idea. At the heart of this thinking is a conviction that real insights come from within, not from without. It's called insight because it comes from within, not from without. So, if you apply these two methods to Ibrahim alayhi salam, what is happening? You see Ibrahim pretending to be ignorant, pretending to be simpleton. Ask the biggest idol. Then, what he does, he poses and asks simple questions. Could it be that this biggest idol? And then he gives you the contradictions. How could you worship something that doesn't do anything? Right? In doing that, he is practicing this, getting you to really give birth to your own insights, give birth to your own convictions, give birth to your own beliefs. He begins all this process by questioning. ما هذه التماثيل. Ibrahim could have said, could have told them the conclusion. What you're doing is just ridiculous. He is getting them to think, which is at the heart of this. One wonders, what did Socrates get this from? I mean, I haven't read Taha Abdul Rahman's book yet, but I know I've read the abstract of it, and I know where he's going with it. That type of thinking. He says, Greek philosophy, as much as it's celebrated in terms of critical thinking, goes back to the likes of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Because the prophets of God were not simpleton. These were very intelligent people. Allah does not choose people randomly. So, if you look at the methods of Ibrahim alayhi salam, inshallah, my next book is literally to do with this. Like, it has a chapter on Ibrahim as a philosopher, if you wish, introducing these are the traditions of the day. These are the methods of thinking of the day. He's using them literally at the peak of it. Either the Socratic irony, and then you see, to me this makes perfect sense. Instead of viewing Ibrahim as a liar, and they keep defending him, he's actually using them. He is introducing very innovative ways of thinking that get people to think for themselves. And then I end up discussing whether he's a liar or not. Isn't that shameful? There is a really interesting book that came out in the 7th century that compiled all the hadiths that seem to contradict the Quran. And the book does grapple with this hadith, whether Ibrahim can be viewed as a liar. How could Ibrahim be viewed as a liar when he, Allah introduces him as, Shakir al-An'umeh, all these qualities that Ibrahim is introduced with, and yet he is disqualified in the Day of Judgment from practicing this intercession because he is a liar. Is that possible? That's why we have to be, don't get me wrong, the hadith is a treasure. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is literally a mine of wisdom. But in the very same time, we have to be cautious with specific hadiths when they seem to go against the Quranic worldview. How does the Quran speak of Ibrahim? An intelligent, trustworthy, trustful. Name all the positive qualities you have in mind, you will find Ibrahim at the forefront of it. So if you ever, come across hadiths that disqualifies Ibrahim and, thinking that of course I'm aware that there are scholars who would come up with solutions to this by way of saying, Ibrahim actually, there is a method or a principle in the Islamic spiritual tradition that says Hasanatul Abrar, Sayyi'atul Muqarrabin. Basically, Ibrahim alayhi salam, this is his standard. He says, according to my very high moral standard, this is a lie. Right? Because I abide by a very high standard of morality. And therefore, you might think it's a simple, actually you might not think it's a mistake, because I could see what the point is, but to my standard of truthfulness, this is unacceptable. Is this the case? I understand where the thought is coming from, I understand where the principle is coming from, but I don't take this as a solid argument. Why? Because what Ibrahim is doing here is something that is wonderful. There is a world of difference between trying to assure that Ibrahim is making a mistake and actually taking him as teaching us a method of thinking. And he is not lying for the sake of lying. He's not even lying to begin with. So that's a different framework. That is a different framework. And that's actually one of the things that have made us, somehow that led us not to benefit from our from these role models as much as we should. How could we escape someone like Ibrahim? Top quality in terms of thinking, in terms of practical philosophy, practical wisdom. How is it we just pass by him? Prophet, and that's it. He's teaching us methods here. And don't tell me this argument after, imagine if Ibrahim chose a different path, a different way of making his point. Could you think of a better way of delivering this argument? I can't think of a better way. And therefore, when you come across a hadith that challenges how, the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Mohammed, there is a hadith in Sahih Muslim, when the Prophet ﷺ was walking by in the marketplace, and someone called him, he said, Ya khayr al-bariyya, oh, the best of all humanity. And how does he respond? The Prophet immediately said, Baldaka Ibrahim. Actually, this is Ibrahim, that's not me. Don't call me the best of humanity. What's the point behind this? The point is, when you come across a hadith, because this hadith is on social media, there are times when it goes viral. And you have, it gets you to question, part of my life was spent on this as well. As in, how could I defend Ibrahim's mistake? Right? When the man is doing an amazing job. Right? It's just because my framework is stupid, I add stupidity to the whole thing. And you try your hardest to make a point, to find a good response. This is Ibrahim's moral standard, he goes by that, but we can't go by it. Just look at the chain of narrators. You will definitely come across something dodgy happening there. And we have stories, when we have an entire discipline in the hadith studies known as al-jarh wa al-ta'dil. Science of verification. How do I verify the narrators of hadith? Whether this is truthful or untruthful. Why did this discipline emerge? It emerged because there were people who fabricate hadith. I mentioned at some point that there are people that would actually fabricate hadith thinking that this is good for the deen. In hadith studies, they would say, be cautious with hadiths that tell you, if you say subhanallah, you have 100 heavens on the day of Jannah or something. And he says like exaggerative forms of reward in response to one small act. Right? He says you have to question these hadiths. We are told of someone when he was told of what this hadith you're saying is not really, this chain is not strong, it's not authentic. He says he was told like إنما تكذب على رسول الله, you're lying about the Prophet. He says إنما أكذب له لا عليه. He said actually I'm lying for him, not against him. Can you believe that there was a point when people, this whole discipline came to challenge these problems, right? This system is very useful, very helpful, and we should be thankful to our scholars for working on this system, because the Isnad system, we don't know of any ummah in history that had come up with a similar system, a system of authentication. How do I authenticate someone's statements when I study the details of these people, the personalities, whether they made mistakes? But we also have to understand that this system can never be 100% certain. They did their best, right? Could be 70%, 80%, 90%, but don't take it as a Quran. Otherwise you'll be wrong in the hadith, wrong in the Prophet, wrong in the Sunnah of the Prophet, and wrong in the Quran. Nothing can compete with the Quran. And therefore, when you hear a hadith that seems to challenge the Quran, think twice about it, go and study the chain of narrators, see the context of it, right? And primarily look at what the Quran has to say, how Ibrahim has been introduced. So, we've taken so much time. So I always get fascinated by Ibrahim in terms of methods. Knowledge is about methods by the end of the day. Knowledge is about methods. The rest is ideology. There is a reason Imam al-Shafi'i is a giant. even though I mentioned this a lot, before him there was Abu Hanifa, and I was raised as a Hanafi myself. The Malik was before him, but the one who worked on methodology in terms of writing down something on methodology was a Shafi'i. Earliest thing that we have. So the Muslim mind for a good number of centuries was dominated by Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i's methodology. There is a reason why Ibn Khaldun was a giant. He played with methodology. And methodology helps you at times of ignorance. Like I'll say a little bit more about this. There is a reason, there is always, especially today, there is this comparison between Al-Ghazali and Fakhruddin al-Razi. Which one is more profound? Which one is actually more genius? They both are geniuses. Today's academia focuses more on al-Razi, even though a couple of decades ago, Al-Ghazali would be seen as a giant, and it still is. There is a trend today that says Fakhruddin al-Razi was actually more giant than Al-Ghazali. To my understanding, no. He wrote more than Al-Ghazali had written, but Al-Ghazali is the one who opened the door. Al-Ghazali was the one who changed the framework. And he let Al-Razi think in this way. So, even though Al-Razi had written much more than Al-Ghazali, the guy who played with the method was Al-Ghazali. Apply this to Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim. Ibn Qayyim had written a lot more than Ibn Taymiyyah. But the one who had the heavy work was Ibn Taymiyyah. You will always have this. So the one who works on methods is literally, don't we have this ourselves? Like someone comes up with a methodology, the whole world gets moved by it. Let's do this in this way, in this Socratic way, in this blah blah blah, until there's another way of doing it. Changes the whole thing. That's methodology. And the whole world changes when methodology changes, by the way. But the thing is, for methodology to really operate and work properly, it needs to have a living culture. Why did Shafi'i's method was taken up, celebrated, and operationalized? But Ibn Khaldun was not. Ibn Khaldun's system of thinking, more profound than Shafi'i. By definition, he came 4 centuries later. Knowledge has advanced, blah blah blah. But the reason he was not, we knew Ibn Khaldun from the West, by the way, in the 19th century. We were told by Orientalists that you guys have a good thinker. His name is Ibn Khaldun. Right? We started to think about him. Why? When a good idea emerges into a dead culture, nobody makes use of it. When Ibn Khaldun had written his Muqaddimah, the Muslim world was dead. Alas. What are you talking about? Nobody cares. Ash-Shatibi, another more original contribution than I don't seem to be underestimating Shafi'i, but his contribution is solid. Nobody cares. Because at the time when it emerged, it was a dead time. Nobody is listening. So these are very important moments in terms of history, and it just shows that it is very important to always be busy ourselves with methods. How do I think, not just what I think. And again, I always get fascinated by this aspect of Ibrahim alayhi salam. I talk too much, but inshallah, perhaps in 2 minutes we'll finish. Arnie, you had a point?
Oh, mine was just the contradiction between young boy and then the whole village mob mentality, like bringing them to shame. I thought like literally the opposite of you.
Interesting.
Because we did the witch trials around Bath, but the concept of like getting someone, publicly humiliating them, like is what came to my mind when I saw like a young boy versus a crowd of people coming to say witness this trial. That's what I thought. Negative thinking, but it's nice that other people think so purely.
Thank you for that. That's how I would take it more. But thank you, Maya, as well for that. Like it gets me thinking. We could see this as a justice thing. If only he didn't say لعلهم يشهدون, just for them to see what is happening. it's hard as well to think of this. I don't know this part, this epoch in history as a when a just system was established as such. Maybe, who knows? Any other thoughts before we draw this to a close? I hope I answered your question, or your point by looking at the culture behind. And what I'm trying to say, to highlight here, as in it is important as well to look at the background of Ibrahim, the background of Socrates, the background of everyone. It does impact how we think. We without looking at the background where Ibrahim comes in, you can easily say, just frame this as a lie, and then you keep defending him when he's just doing a very original thing. If we don't have any questions, we can draw this to a close. No questions? No problem. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك